Welcome to part 2 on promoting children's mental health. My name is Paula Rico. I'm an occupational therapy student at the University of Toronto, currently doing my placement at the Wellspring Early Years program. The focus of this workshop will be in providing you with practical coping strategies you can do with your children, as well as tools you can use as a caregiver to promote your own mental health and well-being. Coping strategies are tools that we normally use to help us adjust to stressful events, as well as help us maintain our emotional well-being. Before I start, I want to emphasize this workshop is a general introduction to promoting children's mental health and coping strategies. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I have also created a link with a list of resources within the community that you can find in the description below. And if you have any specific concerns about your child, please contact your family doctor, a pediatrician, or a mental health professional as they can provide you with further support. A quick review of what we learned in part 1. We talked about the 3-brain theory. We talked about the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and the brainstem. It's so important to understand these 3 parts of the brain in order to understand how to regulate our own emotions, as well as our children's. We also talked about the hand-brain model, and the hand-brain model is a great way to understand the 3 different parts of the brain, as well as what happens when we get overwhelmed. And we refer this to as flipping one's lid. I'll be using this term throughout the entire workshop. If anything's unclear, it might be helpful to review part 1 of this workshop. A great way to explain what it's like to actually feel overwhelmed to your children is by using analogies. Here are 2 great analogies you can use. The first analogy is the jar full of glitter. This is a great way to show your child what it's like when they're feeling overwhelmed, as well as when other people are feeling overwhelmed. The glitter represents their emotions, and when you shake it, your emotions go all over the place, and you can't see clearly. But if you wait, your emotions start to settle down, just like the glitter, and you'll be able to see clearly again. Sometimes all we need for our emotions to settle down is to count up to 10, or sometimes you need other coping strategies, and this is how you can introduce other strategies to your children. Another analogy you can use with your children is the boiling pot, and this is a great way to explain why coping strategies are really important. Just like when you're boiling water, you have to monitor the temperature, or else you'll run the risk that the water will boil over. In this case, the temperature represents coping strategies, and the water represents your emotions. It's really important to use coping strategies to prevent your emotions from boiling over. Therefore, these 2 analogies provide a great way for children to understand why it's important to use different coping strategies. The 3 R's by Dr. Bruce Perry provides you with 3 steps you can actually follow when you're trying to respond when your child is dysregulated or feeling overwhelmed. The first R is regulate, which means our first step is to actually help our children calm down. The second R is relate. It is really important to validate our children's feelings as well as make them feel safe. The third R is reason. This is when you talk to your child about what they did, and this is a learning opportunity for them. When a child is dysregulated and they're misbehaving, we often tend to skip the first step and the second step and go straight to the third step, reason. Although we want to help, our children's lid is not backed on, therefore they're not able to process what we're telling them, and we might be making them more stressed, therefore aggravating the situation. When the child is feeling overwhelmed, their fight, flight, or freeze response is activated. That means that their heart rate is increased, their body temperature has increased, and they're hyperventilating. That's why the first R is regulate. We need to calm our children down. And we do this by connecting to their 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. By helping connect them to the 5 senses, we're helping them get back into the window of tolerance as well as get back to the present moment. And these are called grounding exercises. This model, originally created by Dr. Sigel, it is really helpful to understand when to use different coping strategies. And before I introduce new coping strategies, it might be helpful to review this model in part 1 of this workshop, as I go into more detail about each zone: hyperarousal, window of tolerance, and hypoarousal. And it's going to give you a deeper appreciation on when to use different strategies depending on your emotional state and depending on where it falls under. Based on the previous model, Julia Wishart created the zones of regulation, in which she grouped different emotions into different colors and based on how your body feels. This is a great way to introduce different strategies that work depending on which color zone you are in. The blue zone represents the hyperarousal state, and this is when your body feels like it's shutting down, you're feeling sad, and you're feeling unmotivated. The red zone represents the hyperarousal emotional state, and that's when you're feeling angry and out of control, and you feel that you can't calm down. The green zone and the yellow zone fall under the window of tolerance. Right now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the blue zone and the red zone as they correlate really well with the first R, regulate. And then I'm going to talk about the yellow zone as it correlates with the second R, relate. And then I'm going to talk about the green zone as it correlates really well with the third R, reason. So here are some tools that are really helpful when you're in the red zone. The first strategy is deep breathing, and I have introduced different ways you can do this with your child in previous workshops, but right now I'm going to introduce a new one that you can do. That way you have different options that you can choose from and see which one works best for your child. So here is the new strategy. This one is called Lazy 8. You can trace the number 8 with their finger or you can use your finger. So you start out here where the star is and you tell them to breathe in through their nose as they trace this loop, and then as they cross the star, then you tell them to breathe out through their mouth, and again as they trace it. And you can do this as many times as it takes for them to feel better. It's really important to do it with them, that way they can see how it is done. Sometimes children have a hard time understanding how deep to breathe in and then to breathe out. So a helpful way to do this is you can ask your child to lay down on top of a mat or on top of the bed, and you can put their favorite stuffed animal on top of their belly, and as they breathe in and out, they can see their stuffed animal go up and down, and this is a fun way to teach them how to do it. Other helpful strategies when you're in the red zone are drinking cold water, listening to calm music, as well as smelling lavender oil, which is a calming essential oil. Or you can ask them to engage in physical activity, either running or jumping up and down, and that way they can actually use up all the energy that they have stored inside of them. When you're in the blue zone, some helpful strategies that you can use is deep breathing, like last time. We can also use paired muscle relaxation, and that is when you ask the child to tense their muscles, all the muscles in the body, and then breathe in, and then they relax all their muscles and then breathe out. And one way to introduce it to children is by using a stress ball. You can ask them to squeeze the stress ball in and then breathe in, and to let go and then breathe out. Sometimes stress balls are a bit tricky because when they see a ball, they think of throwing, not squeezing. So an alternative is actually to use a sponge. When the children see a sponge, they automatically squeeze. So this is great. Also, you can get a sponge with different textures in order to connect to their sense of touch. Okay, another strategy you can use is physical activity. The reason for physical activity is a little bit different compared to the previous zone. For this one, you're using physical activity to get them moving and to get their energy up that way. And the last one is essential oil. You can use an essential oil that is activating, that it helps them get that energy up. And a great essential oil is peppermint. Sometimes when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's really hard to come up with strategies. That's why I will highly recommend to actually create a basket or a box full of different strategies that I mentioned previously. That way, when your child is screaming and yelling and you can't think of how to calm them down, you can actually reach for that basket or that box with all the different strategies that you can actually use when you need them. Sometimes it is really hard to calm our child down. We have tried everything, and that is okay. Just to let you know, there's a great resource out there that in case you need it. They are called walk-in counseling centers, and there's many across Toronto and across the GTA. I have a list of them on the link down below. But they're really helpful. They're completely free, and once you go in, they're able to actually help your child right away when they need that, as well as they're able to help you. They give you helpful strategies and resources that you might need for the future. So I highly recommend this. Also, I want to say that the different centers have different hours, so you can actually choose the different centers depending on which one is closest to you and or which one is open when you actually need it. And it's an amazing resource. So if you're interested, again, there's a link down below. So now that your child has calmed down after you have used different strategies, now you can move on to the second R, relate. So this is really important. This is when you validate the children's emotions, how they're feeling, and you make them feel safe. And you do this by giving them a warm hug, by being there for them. And when you do this, oxytocin is released in their bodies, which goes to a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain, which signals to them and to their body that they're safe. So this is a really important step within the 3 R's. I also like to mention that just like when you're in an airplane and you have to put on the oxygen mask first and then your child's, it is the same thing when we talk about emotional regulation. So as a parent and caregiver, we need to regulate our emotions first before we regulate our children's emotions. So when you're helping regulate your children's emotions, it's important for you to remain calm. A helpful strategy that you can use is the STOP acronym. So S stands for stop, T stands for take a breath, O stands for observe, and P stands for proceed. And again, you can do this whenever you feel that you're overwhelmed before you try to deal with the situation. Just go through the STOP acronym. Self-care is really important. Sometimes we are so preoccupied with our children's health and how they're doing that we often forget about our own needs. And they are as equally as important because when you take care of yourself, children learn how to take care of themselves too by watching you. Therefore, it's important to incorporate self-care into your daily routine. Because when you feel calm, your child is also calm. And this is called co-regulation. Children regulate their emotions through you, especially when they're young, as you can see on the graph. And as they grow older, they start to self-regulate more. You might be asking yourself, then why am I teaching my child at an early age coping strategies if I'm gonna do it with them? It's really helpful for them to have the tools when they're young, that way that they have a ton of practice using them. And that way when they start to self-regulate, they have those tools available to them. And it takes time, it takes practice. We ourselves know many adults who struggle regulating their own emotions. And even from our own lives and from our own experiences, we know how important it is to regulate our emotions, because if you're not able to regulate your emotions, you don't get a good night's sleep, which can also affect your education or your work performance, and it can affect many aspects of your life. You might be asking yourself, what is the proper way to co-regulate with my young child? The first thing that is important to consider is to teach your child how to label their emotions. That way, they're able to express how they feel, and when they need help and support, they're able to ask for it. The second one is model. So show them how to use the self-calming strategies. And we talked a little bit about this before with the deep breathing exercise. The third one is redirect. And we can do this by helping our child calm down, and by doing that, we're also redirecting their attention at the same time. And the last one is support. And this one relates to the second R, relate, which is provide a warm and nurturing supported relationship. All of these are important to co-regulate. And all the strategies I learned by attending a conference by the Institute of Children's Mental Health. So now I want to go back to the zones of regulations that we previously talked about. So you use the second R when the child is in the yellow zone, so no longer in the blue or the red zone. And if we were to compare this to the window of tolerance, yellow is still within the window of tolerance, but is right in the border between the red, the hyperarousal, and the blue, which is the hyperarousal emotional state. So this is just to give you an idea where yellow falls under in that model. And the yellow zone is when they are feeling anxious, frustrated, and worried. And different tools that you can use is you can tell your child, you can talk to a parent or a teacher about how you feel. A great way to start a conversation with your child is by reading the book The Worry Box by Suzanne Chiu and Sean Julian. The book is about a bear who is going on an adventure and he's very scared. His sister, who is going with him, tells him to write down all his fears, all his emotions down in pieces of paper and put it inside a worry box. And that helps him. Another activity you can do with your child is that you can create the worry box like you see in the picture on the screen. And 1 hour or 2 hours before they go to bed, you can have a discussion with them about what are they worried about, any fears, and reassure them that everything's going to be okay. After they have written all their fears down, or you have helped them write them down, they put them in the worry box, and that way when they go to sleep, they feel calm and relaxed, and they have a good night's sleep. Another strategy you can use is let them express their feelings, and you're gonna just be there to listen to them and to validate their feelings. When a child is also in the yellow zone, you can also ask them if they want to give you a hug or if they want to hug their favorite stuffed animal. The last two bullet points, use mindfulness and meditate. I'm gonna talk about them briefly later on in the workshop. After your child has gone through the yellow zone, now you can move on to third R, reason. When children are in this stage, that's when they're in the green zone and they are calm, they're happy, they are focused, and they are ready to learn. And this is when their lid is back on. So that's when they can actually think clearly, they're able to process information, and they're going to remember what you told them. So this is the step where you actually do take the time to actually talk to them. This is when you engage them in self-reflection. For really young children, you might be guiding them through self-reflection, giving them all the steps, but as they grow older, they can actually do this on their own. But again, you have given them practice and examples, so that way when they get older, they know how to do it. An example of self-reflection could be, next time when you're angry, you can squeeze a ball, or you can jump up and down to get all the energy out, or you can listen to calm music. Which one do you want to do next time? That way you're giving them different options that they can choose from. That way next time they know what to do. And on the third R, this is when they learn when to use different strategies and how to self-regulate. I also want to emphasize building your children's self-esteem is really important. And you do this by giving them positive reinforcement. A great book that I highly recommend is Have You Filled a Bucket Today by Carol McLeod. The book is about kindness, and it talks about how different people have an invisible bucket, and the only way to make yourself happy is by being kind towards others and filling their bucket. This is a great activity to do with your child to let them know how important it is to actually be kind towards others. But it's also a good reminder for caregivers and parents to think about, have I filled my child's bucket today? Have I given them compliments? Have I built their self-esteem? And if an activity that you can do with your child is, as you can see on the far right, there is a worksheet where you can ask them, have you filled somebody's bucket today? And you can also ask them, have I filled your bucket today? And that's a great way to start a conversation of how caring, loving, and kind they are. And this way you're giving them positive reinforcement and reinforcing positive behavior. It's also really important to build your children's confidence in doing things on their own. The book I Can Handle It by Laurie Wright is an amazing book. I also highly recommend it. It talks about a child who encounters different situations that children normally encounter, and he has no idea what to do. He's filled with doubt, and then he takes a pause, and then he starts to think of different things that he can do. and then he realizes that he was able to do it by himself all along. This is also a great book because it teaches children how to problem solve. Another way to build their children's self-esteem and their confidence is by fostering a positive mindset. So changing something like that child just wants my attention to the child needs my attention. As you can see in the pictures, your mindset affects how you behave as well as how your child responds and behaves as well. This is really important to know because if you foster a positive mindset, indirectly you're also fostering positive behaviors in your child. I also would like to introduce mindfulness, a skill that involves paying attention to your feelings, your thoughts, your bodily sensations purposefully in a non-judgmental way, and it brings you back to the present moment. This is really important because we are often so preoccupied with our thoughts that we often forget to check in with ourselves to see how we're doing. And when you are preoccupied with thoughts all the time, what happens is that you're feeling stressed all the time, and when something does happen, you erupt just like a volcano. And as I mentioned before, mindfulness is simply noticing what is happening in the moment without reacting, allowing thoughts, feelings, impulses to pass by rather than to pursue them. So, a great analogy for mindfulness is imagine yourself sitting on a shore watching the river as the water flows. And the water represents your thoughts and your feelings, and you're just watching as the water flows without having any emotional reaction towards it. And you might be asking yourself, why should I do this? And I would like to actually say that there has been a lot of research, especially within the past few years, that has shown that mindfulness improves your sleep, lowers your stress levels, improves your attention, it helps you manage your chronic illness, reduce anxiety, and recent research has shown that there's actually structural and functional changes in certain parts of your brain involved in attention, emotions, and self-awareness. Mindfulness meditation is a skill, and like any skill, you might not get it on the first try, and that's okay. That's why it's essential to build it into your daily routine, and I'll talk about a few strategies briefly. And as we briefly mentioned before, mindfulness meditation involves noticing what is happening inside and outside your body in that moment. And you can use an anchor, often the breath, to keep yourself in contact with the present. I also would like to say that an anchor can be anything in the environment that is constant that brings you back into the present moment. For example, for my own personal experience, I find calming music in the background really helpful to bring myself back into the present moment. Other strategies that you can use is you can use walking meditation, in which you can use the feeling against the ground on your feet and the feeling on your legs as the anchor point to bring you back to the present. Two ways you can bring mindfulness into your daily routine is by using cues. For example, every time that you walk through a door, to remember to be mindful, or you can set reminders on your phone. Another way is choosing an activity that you do in your daily life and use that as a reminder to take a time to notice what sounds do you hear, what physical sensations do you feel, and what are you thinking about. To guide you through your meditation, I would like to say that there are many apps out there as well as YouTube videos that are really helpful. Here are some examples of some apps that are out there. On the red box you see some apps for adults, and on the green box you see some apps for children. And in the description down below I have a list of all the apps as well as YouTube channels that I found really helpful to introduce mindfulness to your child as well as for you to try it. So if you are interested, you can check that out. Children also benefit from mindfulness, and a great way to introduce mindfulness to children is through books. And these are two great books, Breathe Like a Bear by Kira Willey and Listening to My Body by Gabi Garcia. Both of these books are great as they go through what it's like when you're meditating, as well as providing examples of how they can do it in their daily life. I also would like to say that all the books I recommended today, as well as in other workshops, are available on YouTube, and you can actually listen to them with your children being read out loud. And that's all I have for today. I hope you found this workshop helpful. And again, two helpful tools that you can use with your children is the source of regulations. This is a great way to introduce different coping strategies to your children, and this is also great for children to remember if they have watched Inside Out and they can recognize some of the characters. Also, the 3 R's by Dr. Bruce Perry. This is a really helpful guide to help you when your child is dysregulated. And again, remember to do the steps in order. First regulate, then relate, and then reason. Thank you again for listening. If you do have any comments, please post a comment on the Facebook group, or you can fill out the survey in the link below. Thank you. Goodbye.